Community Health Worker Training, Cardiovascular Health and Diabetes, Module 7B, Managing Diabetes. Learning outcomes for this mini module: explain the steps in managing diabetes and describe the principles of a diabetes diet. So the first thing that someone needs to do when they first find out that they have diabetes is to learn more about it. And probably the best website for doing that is the American Diabetes Association website. It has a lot of good patient information and handouts and some of the latest information. There's other reliable websites online, including diabetes information through the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, and other sites. You want to be sure, though, to teach your clients only to use reliable online websites. And those tend to be websites that are associated with either the government, so the Department of Health or the CDC or the NIH, or with hospitals, so the Mayo Clinic or the Cleveland Clinic, with universities or medical schools, and then organizations like American Diabetes Association. Certainly some other websites about different illnesses or chronic diseases have accurate information, but you can't always rely on them to have accurate information. So you want to be careful about which websites you refer your clients to. And also, when they are coming to you with information that they read online, you want to talk to them about reliable sources of information online. Okay, so in terms of learning about diabetes, some really important facts in terms of the incidence of diabetes in the U.S. 29 million people have diabetes, so it's a huge problem. 86 million people have prediabetes, so those people are all at pretty high risk of developing diabetes. And 8 million people who have diabetes don't know that they have it. And 90% of the people who have prediabetes don't know that they have it. So there's a really huge need for community health workers to do a lot of community education for people about getting screening as well as treatment and prevention. Go ahead and click on this video to hear a little introduction to diabetes management, and then come back to the PowerPoint afterwards.
Welcome to Your Health with Joan London, presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Hi, I'm Joan London. Diabetes is a growing epidemic in this country, affecting more than 29 million people. The management of diabetes can be overwhelming to some. I'm joined by Dr. Ann Albright, Director of the CDC's Division of Diabetes Translation, who lives with diabetes every day and has to manage it. What's the hardest part, Ann, of managing diabetes?
Well, I live with diabetes most of my life, and it absolutely takes effort to live with diabetes. You have to pay attention to your food and being active and taking your medications. But everything that you do to manage it is worth it.
Yeah, you really have to kind of embrace the lifestyle, right?
That's right.
But 1 in 3 Americans may develop this some point in their lives. But there are things you can do to lessen your chances of getting type 2 and just to make living with diabetes easier. Walk us through some of those.
In taking care of your diabetes, it really is critical that you are establishing healthy lifestyle habits, eating healthy, certainly getting less sugar and salt, being active, being physically active, working closely with your healthcare provider. Be sure to take your medicines as prescribed, and certainly check your blood sugar regularly. It's absolutely critical as well that you get diabetes self-management education. That's really the key to learning to live well with diabetes.
And you say everyone needs to know their ABCs. What are those?
Yeah, A1C is a blood test that lets you see how your blood sugar control has been over the last couple months. You also need to get your blood pressure checked. You need to get your cholesterol checked, and certainly stop smoking and never start if you haven't.
So, but really important, you should try to find the support of an educator and a group like the Diabetes Self-Management Education Program, and involve your family as well, right?
Absolutely. You need to be sure your family's involved and that they also get the support that they need.
All right, Ann, thank you so much. It is a team effort, and that does include family and friends. And there are also wonderful diabetes educators and online support groups to help you keep on track. I'm Joan London. Thanks for joining us.
Sponsored by NACDD with support from the...
Okay, so let's break down the different steps of managing diabetes once somebody has been diagnosed with it. So the primary thing is to try to control the blood sugar. You really want that person with diabetes to try to maintain a steady blood sugar, neither too high nor too low. And there's several components to maintaining a healthy blood sugar. So first of all, they need to get on a healthy diet. We'll talk more about that in a minute. In many cases, they need to go on medication to help them control their blood sugar. And they need to do blood glucose testing pretty regularly to see where their blood sugar is at. And if it's too high, to adjust what they're doing. If it's too low, to adjust what they're eating. So in addition to controlling their blood sugar, they need to control their weight. If they're overweight, it's better if they can get into a healthy weight. Exercise is very important, and regular health care. And we'll talk more about each of these things in detail. So in addition to having to follow all of the lifestyle approaches to control their diabetes, diabetics are 2 to 4 times more likely to die of stroke or heart disease than non-diabetics. So they also have to follow cardiovascular health guidelines. And fortunately, a lot of the guidelines for controlling diabetes and for cardiovascular health overlap. So they're not in contradiction to each other. So if you're following a healthy diet, it's going to help both your diabetes and your heart. Both of them require you to exercise, require you to maintain a normal blood pressure, to get on blood pressure medication if it's too high. So those two things completely overlap, but it's important for diabetics to understand that they do have that increased risk of cardiovascular disease. So here are some guidelines about how to live well with diabetes. Let's start with eating less sugar. So people with diabetes often find that eating less sugar helps them to control their blood glucose levels. Foods that are high in sugar, whether it's natural sugars like dried fruit have or orange juice has, or whether it's added sugar like cakes and candies, those sugars get digested very quickly and get into the bloodstream and sometimes can really spike blood glucose or blood sugar levels. And so diabetics really need to stay away from those things almost entirely. Also remind people that they have to think about what they're drinking. So a lot of people drink a lot of sugar, and that's mostly in sodas. It's also, though, in 100% natural fruit juices. So diabetics are much better eating a whole fruit than drinking the juice. Sometimes diabetics will say, well, I'll drink diet soda. And unfortunately, that is not a good solution, because the fake sugars that are in diet sodas actually throw off the insulin balance in the body. So they really need to get used to drinking things that don't have sugar or artificial sugars in them, such as water, flavored water without added sugar. Unsweetened tea or coffee, unsweetened seltzer, stuff like that. In addition, diabetics need to eat less fat, especially saturated fats. They want to avoid fried foods and instead choose foods that are baked, broiled, grilled, boiled, or steamed. They want to choose meats that have little fat. And when they're eating dairy products like cheese, milk, yogurt, or others, they want to choose those that are low fat, so 2% fat or less. For things like yogurt also, flavored yogurts tend to have a lot of sugar, so they want to be careful about that. Eat less sodium or less salt. So actually eating less sodium helps to control blood pressure. And high blood pressure actually can both raise the risk of getting diabetes, but it can also raise the risk of complications of diabetes if it's not controlled at the same time. Quit smoking. That's actually super important. People with diabetes who smoke are more likely to have nerve damage and damage in their feet, for instance, and kidney disease than those who don't smoke. Drink less alcohol. Alcohol can cause many health problems, especially for people with diabetes. It adds calories without giving any nutrients. Drinking alcohol can cause dangerous reactions with diabetic medications. And actually, sometimes people drink on an empty stomach, and that can make the blood glucose go down too low. Certain drinks have a lot of sugar in them, and they can make the blood glucose go up too high. So it's not that people can never drink, but they need to be very moderate about it, and they need to discuss it with their doctor. And then finally, managing stress. Stress can raise blood glucose levels. So you want to help people diagnosed with diabetes to come up with good stress management and coping techniques. Things like deep breathing or meditation, gardening, taking a walk, working on a hobby, or listening to music can help people cope with the stresses of daily life. They should also ask for help if they start to feel down or depressed. A mental health counselor, support group, a member of the clergy, a friend, or a family member who will listen to your concerns can also help you feel better. Eating a healthy diabetic diet is the cornerstone of blood glucose management. And there are some general principles that are important for diabetics to understand. So the first thing is they need to eat 3 well-balanced meals a day and usually 1 to 2 healthy snacks. So they're going to be eating about every 4 to 5 hours. And every time they eat, they should be eating something that's balanced. So you see this meal here as an example. It has some protein, which is the fish. It has vegetables in it, and it has a healthy starch. In this case, it's a whole wheat rice. And when you combine food from different groups like that, it helps to bring the blood sugar up into the normal range, and it helps to stay in that normal range for longer rather than eating just one type of food. They really need to pay attention to serving sizes. Often Americans eat much bigger, even if they're eating healthy food, they eat much bigger serving sizes than the body needs. Diabetics need to minimize simple carbohydrates. And what that means is that avoiding food with sugar, right, like sweets, cookies, cakes, pastries, candy, brownies, sugary breakfast cereals, sugary yogurt, okay? But it also means avoiding things that sometimes people think of as starches. And these are simple carbohydrates that are very highly processed foods that the body breaks down into sugar quickly, and they cause a spike in the blood sugar, and then the blood sugar drops suddenly. And these are foods like chips and your white foods. So think about white bread, pasta, white flour tortillas, white rice. So foods like that, you want to really move more toward whole grain foods and high fiber foods. So whole grain breads, whole wheat bread, whole wheat cereal, or cereal that has more of a unprocessed type of cereal. Things like barley, oatmeal, unsweetened oatmeal, and then other high fiber foods or foods with complex carbohydrates like dried beans, lots of vegetables are very high fiber, and those are all very good for diabetics. They're good for everybody. Again, avoiding sugars, so sweets, soda, juice, dried fruit, raisins, even though they are healthy in terms of having vitamins, they have actually a lot of sugar in them, and diabetics need to avoid them or have them very rarely. And then again, if the diabetic is overweight, they need to work on getting their weight down into a healthy range. One simple way to discuss healthy eating with clients is to use the plate method. And so the approach of the plate method is simply that you think of your plate as divided in half. One whole half of it should be vegetables. And you'll see it said as fruit and vegetables, but for diabetics, it should be mostly vegetables. A quarter of it should be lean protein. Okay, and then a quarter of it should be the starch. And again, whole wheat type starches are healthier than white starches. Okay, and drinks, again, we're leaning toward water or low fat milk for diabetics. And here are a couple of examples with real food of healthy plates. So in the example on the left, if you divide the plate in half, you've got a half of the plate is vegetables. So this particular person is having a quarter of a plate of salad and a quarter of a plate of broccoli. You could have the whole half of the plate to be the same vegetable if you wanted to. Then a quarter of the plate is chicken, and a quarter of the plate is rice and beans. On the right is another way or other food choices using that same concept. So in this case, the protein is scrambled eggs, and it's a quarter of the plate. The starch here is potatoes, and then the vegetables are asparagus and either tomatoes or red peppers. Now, diabetic snacks are in small quantities, and they usually mix at least 2 food groups, again, to help kind of bring the blood sugar into normal range and maintain it there longer. They often have some protein and some fiber, that are both things to keep the blood sugar steady without spiking it, like would happen with sweets or simple carbohydrates such as chips. So here's a few examples. There's some mixed nuts. There's hummus, which is made out of chickpeas, which are a type of bean, with some vegetables to dip in. There's cheese and crackers, and that's a whole grain cracker. It's Triscuits. On the top right is cottage cheese with a little bit of fruit, and then an apple with peanut butter. So all of these are very healthy diabetic snacks. Again, serving size is important, right? So if you eat the whole box of Triscuits, even though it's healthy, that's not a healthy snack. So this is an excellent video that kind of takes you through a grocery store with a dietitian, and she's going to explain how to shop for healthy foods for diabetics and really healthy foods for everyone. It takes time for people to learn how to shop and cook in a new way when they're diagnosed with diabetes. But with patience and support, people can find foods that they like that are also good for them. It's also important to let diabetics know that it's going to take a while for their taste buds to get used to different foods. So to not give up on things, to try different foods, more than once and give it a little bit of time. And eventually they will stop craving. If they've had a diet high in sugar, they'll stop craving that really sugary stuff. If they've had a diet high in salt, their taste buds will adjust and they'll get used to a less salty diet if they just are patient and they stick with it. So go ahead and click on this video.
Welcome to the grocery store. I'm a dietitian and diabetes educator, and we're going to spend the next few minutes talking about how to get the most out of your next shopping experience. You've just seen your doctor. They tell you that your blood sugars are a little higher than what they should be, and that you either have prediabetes or diabetes. This probably comes as a shock to you and can often be very overwhelming. Your doctor also tells you that the foods that you're choosing to eat, as well as being active, is even more important than ever. So let's take a look and find out how we can keep shopping fun and have it be an enjoyable experience and even be empowering. Your grocery store shopping experience starts right here, when you're just about to enter the grocery store or have just entered. So a couple things to keep in mind, and this one is probably the most important. You want to go grocery shopping when you're not hungry. I find that if I show up at the grocery store and I'm hungry, it's all over. The other thing to remember is that you want to make sure that you bring a list, helping you stay focused on what you need to buy and making sure your fridge is full of things that you actually need. Lastly, and probably one of the most important things, is sticking to the perimeter of the grocery store. That's where all the goods are, all the natural, basic essentials of a healthy diet are. So we have all of our fruits and our vegetables, the grain products, the milk and alternatives, and the meat and alternatives. They're usually found around the perimeter. Getting caught in the center aisles is often just a recipe for disaster. It's very hard to get out of those sections. Everything is colorful and flashy, and you could spend hours in there and not end up with anything that was on your list. So stick to the perimeter. So when it comes to choosing your fruits and vegetables, it's nice to have a variety. If you're unfamiliar with a certain fruit or vegetable, give it a try. So to be adventurous and just have some fun. Ideally, we want to be focusing on having our dark green leafy vegetables like kale or broccoli. And then we also also want to be having our brightly colored fruits and vegetables like oranges, berries. All of those are really high in antioxidants, vitamins, and minerals, and keep us healthy. Always better to choose fresh or frozen fruits and vegetables rather than canned ones. They're lower in sodium, the nutrient content is often higher. Another thing to keep in mind is better to eat the fruit than to having the juice. Juice just gets into the bloodstream so quickly and makes blood sugars go up really quickly. So with the fruit, we actually get all of that fiber and have much better glycemic control. I should throw some of this broccolini in here too, it looks delicious. Now we're in the grain section. Grains are an important part of a healthy diet for people with diabetes. That ideally we want to have half of our grain products be whole grains, which are higher in fiber and will help us feel fuller as well as more satisfied after we eat. So now that we're in the bread section, we're going to take this opportunity to talk about label reading. Labels are made up of a nutrition facts table that's found on all packaged foods. It consists of calories and 13 core nutrients. Calories are made up of 3 macronutrients. They consist of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. The macronutrient that has the greatest impact on blood sugars is the carbohydrate. So as an example, using this label, if we're looking at the number of carbohydrates, we see 17 grams. Underneath carbohydrates, you see an indentation of fiber and sugar. The reasons that these are indented underneath carbohydrates is that they're incorporated into the carbs. Now, fiber just keeps us regular. It just passes through. So we don't need to account for that energy value in our total amount of carbohydrates. Ideally, we want to keep our carbohydrate load at 45 to 60 grams of carbohydrate per meal, and at snacks, 15 to 30 grams of carbohydrate per meal. The other important thing to make note of is the ingredient list. So whatever ingredient is listed first is in the largest amount, whereas the ingredient at the end of the list is in the smallest amount. So if you ever see a product where sugar is listed first, let's say even before the flour that something is made out of, then that would be a good indication to you that there would be a lot of sugar in that product and it would raise your blood sugars quite high. When we're thinking about this section, it's also important to be adventurous. Try different grains. If you're always just eating rice, maybe try quinoa or bulgur or barley one time just to see what it tastes like. All of these options are high in fiber and are part of a healthy diet. So now we're in our meat section, and the meat section is an important part of a healthy diet. Meats and alternatives are high in protein. Protein helps us feel fuller after we've eaten, and it also helps us control our blood sugar levels post-meal. So in the meat section, what we want to tune into is the amount of saturated fat that's in products, because it's that saturated fat that has been shown to raise cholesterol levels. So when we're choosing meats, we want to try choosing leaner meats with less marbling, less added fats around the outside. The nice thing about this section as well is that, again, there's labels on everything. So we can actually do a comparison between, let's say, some lean ground beef and some regular ground beef and see which one would be the best choice for us based on that nutrition facts table and tuning into the number of grams as well as the percentage daily value in the saturated fats that's listed. Chicken is another great meat alternative, especially if you choose a chicken breast without the skin or take the skin off the chicken that you're cooking. Soy products are low in saturated fats, which makes them a nice meat alternative. They help keep our cholesterol levels down and have a cardioprotective benefit. So fish is a really important part of a healthy diet. According to Canada's Food Guide, we want to ensure that we're having at least 2 servings of fish per week. We're so lucky here living in BC where we have so much access to great choices of fish. Ideally, the fattier fishes are higher in the omega-3 fats, which have a cardioprotective effect. Those would include fish like salmon, sardines, mackerel, trout, and herring. Dairy products are an important part of a healthy diet. They're high in calcium, which keeps our bones strong, and are also a good source of protein, which, as I mentioned before, helps keep us satisfied and also helps us to control our post-meal blood sugars. Ideally, with all dairy products, you'll find on the label an M.F. and that actually stands for milk fat. So when it comes to milk, we want to try choosing milk that's 2% or lower. With regards to yogurt, best to read the label, compare the amount of sugar and carbohydrates in the different yogurts because they're all different, and don't forget to look at the portion size. The cheese section is a really important area to tune into that percentage milk fat. So if we look here on the Old Fort cheddar, we see that there's 31% milk fat. That's almost double the amount of milk fat that's in this mozzarella cheese at 15% milk fat. Now, I love cheese, and I think that this is an important area to just talk about how all foods fit in moderation. It's not about restriction, it's about using that moderation to enjoy the foods that we like to eat, but still keep our blood sugars under control and keep our weight at a healthy weight. So beans are awesome. We all should be eating more beans. They're a great meat alternative. They are low in saturated fat, they're high in fiber, and most importantly, they're delicious. So chickpeas, kidney beans, black beans, lentils, dried peas, just having these foods on hand in your house will open up a whole new way of eating. It will offer you some more options when you're cooking your meals. Main thing to remember is that if you're buying canned beans rather than dried, you have to give them a really good rinse. So that way you're getting rid of the salt, or you can even choose a can that doesn't have salt in it, that are just in water. And then by rinsing them, you're also going to get rid of those extra sugars that potentially could cause some more intestinal discomfort. So rinse your beans and enjoy your beans. They're delicious. So now we find ourselves in the dreaded center aisles. This is where you can get into a lot of trouble. We want to limit the amount of time that we actually spend here. So we're going to take this opportunity to talk about the 4 food groups and how we can actually use the 4 food groups and balance our meal plates. You want half your plate to be vegetables. We talked about the importance of that food group and how that's where all of our vitamins and our minerals are. They're also really low in carbohydrates, so they help us feel fuller, but don't really contribute a huge amount to our glycemic or to our blood sugars after the meal. When we're thinking about portion sizes for vegetables, ideally it's the amount that you can hold in both your hands. So big hands, lots of vegetables. When we're thinking about our starches or the size of fruit, we can also use the size of our fist. That's a good portion size. And then 1/4 of our plate is the protein. So that's our meats and alternatives. A portion size of meat is the size of the palm of our hands and the thickness of our pinky finger. That's about 2.5 ounces. So I know that may seem like it's a little bit small, but 2 portion sizes, 2 servings of protein, so about 5 ounces at a meal, I'd say, is a good amount. Ideally, you want to have 3 out of 4 food groups at your meals and have your snacks have at least 1 to 2 of the food groups. So thanks so much for joining us. It was great to be able to spend some time with you. Hopefully you now feel more confident in your next trip to the grocery store and feel more comfortable about making healthy food choices to help you manage your diabetes. Everything fits in moderation, and just have fun.
In addition to following a healthy diet, another important step in managing diabetes is becoming physically active. One thing that physical activity does is it helps reduce insulin resistance so that the body needs less insulin to do the job, which is really important for diabetics. Making physical activity part of a daily routine is hard for many people. They may be in their 40s or 50s when they're first diagnosed with diabetes and may not have been exercising for quite a long time. When they begin, it's important to first talk to their doctor. The doctor may check the heart, feet, and eyes to make sure that there are no special problems or no reasons not to do certain types of exercise. Physical activity has many benefits. It helps to control the blood glucose and weight. Physical activity can help prevent heart and blood flow problems, so circulation problems, and many people say they feel better and have more energy when they're more active. There's some principles that you can teach your clients so that they don't, go crazy at the gym on the first day and then never exercise again because they're so sore afterwards. So tell them to start with a little. If they haven't been doing physical activity, they want to talk to their doctor before they begin. Walking is often the best place to start, and you want them to be walking so that they're slightly out of breath but can still talk. Sometimes working in the yard or around the house, riding a bike, swimming, playing soccer or other sports, playing with children or grandchildren, or dancing are good ways to start. If they're going to start with walking, taking a 10-minute walk 3 times a day sometimes works for people, or a little bit longer walk, say a 30-minute walk, but at not a very fast pace in the beginning. And then as they become stronger, they can add extra minutes and they can walk a little bit faster. So they're going to work their way up slowly. They should do some physical activity every day. The goal should be 150 minutes of physical activity a week. And twice a week, they should try to work to increase their muscle strength. And that might include going to the gym and lifting weights, could be light weights to begin with, or using stretch bands at home or doing things like push-ups or sit-ups. The other really important thing is that they need to find an activity they enjoy. A lot of people who haven't been exercising haven't been doing it because it's not fun for them. And so they might need to try a bunch of different activities until they find one that they like. If they can do it with a friend or with family members, that can really help them enjoy it more and stick with it. Another component of managing diabetes for most diabetics is going on medication. So some people can control their diabetes just by changing their diet and becoming more active and losing weight. But for a lot of people, they do need to also go on medication. So there's 2 general categories of medication for diabetes. There's oral hypoglycemics, meaning medicines to keep the blood sugar down. And then there's injectables. So those are different types of insulin. And whatever type of diabetes medication the doctor is going to prescribe for a client, they will have the nurse or the diabetes educator work with the client and teach them how to take it, what kind of side effects to watch for, and really just how to manage their medication. And you can kind of support that teaching, but you're not going to be expected as a community health worker to do that teaching for them. All type 1 diabetics and some type 2 diabetics will require insulin to help control their blood glucose. So pills will not work for type 1 diabetics, and some type 2 diabetics can use just the pills and others need to go on insulin. It's not instead of a healthy diet and exercise, but along with it. So there's 2 different ways of getting insulin into the body. People may give themselves insulin injections several times a day, typically 2 to 4 times a day, or they may be put on an insulin pump, which delivers a continuous supply of insulin. In either case, they'll be taught how to self-administer the insulin by a diabetes educator or a nurse. The community health worker can help support their learning and identify any questions or problems they may be having as they learn how to do it. The community health worker may also recognize when someone's having trouble affording their supplies, either the insulin or the syringes, and helping to problem solve with the healthcare team and the client. That's a really important part of your role. Now you can explain the steps in managing diabetes and describe the principles of a diabetes diet. In the next mini module 7C, you'll learn about the complications of diabetes and how to prevent them.